All right. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Carrie, and this is Prophecy Montana that you're watching. Listen, it should be a pretty good talk tonight. We've got a few things that we're going to discuss with your guys' help, of course. And for starters, I'd like to read something out of Proverbs here. This is Proverbs 22, verse 3. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple man pass on and are punished. Okay. And then the next verse is, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. All right. And we may as well read verse 3 too. I love Proverbs. It's one of my favorite books. Thorns and snares are in the way of the froward. He that keepeth his soul shall be far from them. Okay. So there's three good verses that we have. And I just spoke with Rick, or just texted Ricky, and he texted me back, and he says he just got off work, so he's not going to be joining us tonight. So unfortunately, but if you're out there, Dallas, you can shoot me a line, and we'll get you hooked up on the live stream here, and or give me a call. I mean, by my phone, and we can get you on the live stream. But I'm going to get an app. You know, I just don't want to give my phone number out to the whole wide world. Not that, I mean, I don't know if it would even matter, because I mean, if I had 100,000 followers, that would be one thing, but still, I mean, I know there's an app out there that you can give your phone number, or they'll hook you up with a fake phone number, and then you can use that to actually have people call in. And I'm going to try that maybe by next week or something. What would you guys think about talking personally and joining in on the conversation? I personally think it'd be pretty cool, because then I could get to know some of you guys better, and you guys could interact a little bit more intimately with the program and stuff like that. You guys are usually pretty good on the comments. But and by the way, we're going to be talking about the Sunday law a little bit this morning. I did it again. I'm so used to doing lives in the morning. I got a little bit of heartburn too, so pardon me if I'm swallowing and stuff. But yeah, I'm so used to doing live streams in the morning that it just rolls off my tongue. But we're gonna be talking about the Sunday law this evening, and we're gonna be talking about the election a little bit more, because one of the things that I get a little bit of flack from people who are supporters of the right-wing party, AKA Trump, is that if you don't vote Trump, then you must be supporting the agenda of the left, okay? And that is part and parcel of how I think the overall picture is going to start to develop on the hatred for God's people. In other words, what do Seventh-day Adventists have in common with the left-wing party, okay? Just as a people. Now, we've been doing it longer than any left-wing party, but what is a commonality? Number one, the first thing that pops up in my mind is the diet, okay? And the number two thing, now, we just read how a prudent man, he's careful and he avoids injury, right? Or danger. But a fool or a simple man will fall under the traps of the evil one. And so this is, hang on, Ricky just says, okay. So let's be like the wise man, and let's be watchful. Okay. And so we're going to be talking about some of those things that we should be watching out for, that we should be looking out for. And so the left is going to paint this picture, or the devil, let's just call it the devil. Because if I say the left, then it sounds like I'm talking about people, and I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about an ideal, an idealism, a thing, a certain, a plot by Satan to capture. And he's using the left and the right. I'm not just saying that he's using the people on the left. What I'm saying is the plot is all inclusive, and so those who identify with the right have to oppose the left, right? Sounds like a Laurel and Hardy show, huh? The left, right? Okay, but and if you're on the left, of course, then you're enemies of the right, and the right stand for law and justice and God and family and country and love of country and the love of the love of all of these things that are good, right? And life and liberty. And the left is everything bad. It's confinement in communism. It's immorality. It's debased thinking. It's all of these things. And so, I got to thinking, well, my friends kind of, but my friends that know me really good, of course, is who I'm talking about here. Not a casual friend, but the friends that know me really well sort of tease me a little bit about this, because as an Adventist, there's some similarities in my lifestyle that align with the left-wing party, making me the enemy, if you will, okay, the enemy of the people, the enemy of the state. And those are, number one, vegetarianism, okay? Now, we haven't talked about diet much at all on Prophecy Montana. I did a video, my very first video, I spoke a little bit about diet, and it was right when the coronavirus started to kind of take hold of everything, and I addressed that, especially when they said that it was possibly caused by, like bats, if you recall, and I think there's even some consensus that maybe it still came from bats, but I've got my own ideas, but of course, if I express too many of my own ideas, I'll probably get taken off the air. So anyways, yeah, vegetarianism, and it's not something that all Adventists do, and especially living here in Montana. And Montana is like a meat and potatoes kind of place, and that's true with the church too, and a lot of people in the church, they don't subscribe to the vegetarian diet, but it does align us with the left-wing party, because they're generally seen as the ones who want to save the earth, the ones who, through green energy and the eating of plants and not killing animals, and generally this type of thing, and I've been called a soy boy and all kinds of other things, and I don't know what a soy boy is supposed to be, someone who's soft and weak or something. I've had, in my life experience, I've met a lot of vegetarians that were anything but weak. And so, in fact, at my age, 54 years old, I can still go out there and keep up with the young guys. In fact, most of the time I'm passing them up, because, these young guys, they're just not taught how to work properly. And they don't have the work ethic. They don't have the stamina or the staying power, the tolerance for pain, if you will, that you learn with age. You older guys know what I'm talking about. It's a process by which, when you're young, everything hurts. You get out in the sun. Well, I'm a redhead, but you get out in the sun, and the sun hurts you, and the hard labor hurts, and the lifting and the getting up and down hurts, and it still hurts now, but you learn to tolerate it over time, right? But I saw a squirrel there. Sorry. So anyways, and some other identifying marks too. Now, Adventists, if they're aware, if they're sharp, or any Christian out there for that matter, because I see non-Adventists who are equally, aware of what's going on in the political realm, that they may not know all the little fine details, but they know they're being played. They know that this is a show, and that's the takeaway from that. But generally speaking, the aware Adventists see this Christian nationalism movement rising, and the takeover of the far right. Now, again, we all, you guys included, sort of predicted this right-wing takeover, and we thought, well, that this would happen, and we're kind of seeing it, at least the beginning of it. We don't know how far it's going to go. We can't seem to, none of us, to my awareness, are prophets to any extent, but, God has given his people wisdom, and he's given us eyeballs and ears and a brain to think things through, and he's given us prophecy, and he's given us the spirit of prophecy, and when you put all these things together, you can sort of, extrapolate an ending, and whether and how accurate we are with that, we'll see. But so far, so good. And so if you're not supporting the evangelical movement that's going forth and and taking control basically of a lot of our branches of Congress, and our government, because we're told in the spirit of prophecy that it would be the Christians, the Protestant Christians, that would put pressure on the people of the government to make them to pass laws, right? And so that's what we're looking at. And but if you're against those sort of things, then instantly you are seen as being aligned with the left. And because the left are generally godless, but and they don't like the idea of the Christian and the state joining, rightfully so. And maybe it's not just because they don't like God. Maybe it's actually because some of these people are actually aware of of the dangers of that, as the right-wing party should be. Now, it was pointed out earlier, and I wanted to get Ricky on here, but maybe we'll catch him next week. He told me earlier in the week that he probably wouldn't make it because he'd be working. I mean, when the days are nice, he's out and he's busting, he's busting his hump to try and keep the wolf away. But so he's coming home tired right now as we speak. But he had discovered some information about how the Republican Party, actually the Republican Party of all parties, is actually trying to change the Constitution, and they need some 30 states and then a supermajority in the Senate or the Congress to be able to do so. And with each passing year, it gets closer and closer to actually happening. Now, what some of these changes are going to be, I don't know, but probably going to make it a lot easier for Christendom and government to join hands. Now, but we're still waiting for Donald Trump to get into office too, of course, and what will take place when he gets into office is because he's been quoted as saying that that he was going to be a dictator on day one, and that was kind of a scary statement to me. Of course, the people who want to get things done, to go put the bad guys in jail, and to clean up the border, and all these same things, that's what they would like to see, is somebody who gets in there and just be able to override all of the checks and balances to be able to accomplish, this work, this rhetoric that's been spoken of for years now, and it's gotten the people all hyped up. And this is exactly how totalitarian governments form, is they get the backing of the people, and usually they'll gather up combatants, which they haven't really been too successful in, despite what the media has been talking about or saying, they haven't been really all that successful with creating a combatant base, if you will, amongst the right-wing, followers. So they've had to take a little bit of a turn, because I really believe that 4 years ago they were shooting for civil war, and we might still see civil war. In fact, Miss White predicted it, and some have theorized, well, we are in a civil war. We're actually currently in a civil war now, and But I don't know if that's what she meant, if it's just some kind of a, two party opposing each other at a certain frequency or whatever. I think it was supposed to be more intense than that, actual arms being drawn and stuff. And, but civil wars don't have to last that long. They don't have to be, that deadly, really. There just has to be a coup, in order to actually have been called a civil war. But, and if, and I've seen some things happen that sort of suggest that, well, I mean, it's been suggested by others anyways, not necessarily by myself, but that if the left-wing party declares some kind of war or gets some kind of action going where they can declare martial law, then the inauguration of the new president will be held off or put on stay. So really, it's anybody's game at this point, and I know both parties are actually aligned to carry through the Sunday law. If you look closely, you can really see it. I mean, both parties are supported by the Catholics. I mean, look at Trump's cabinet and who he's got, working for him. And it's interesting, even people like Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. I mean, it's almost like if you were going to write a novel, you almost couldn't come up with something better than what they've come up with. And whether it's just all by happy happenstance or whether this is been planned out, which I happen to think the latter has happened. It's been planned out by Satan, and I've said that before, all of these finer details of the workings of all of these things. and and how you take Tucker Carlson and you take Elon Musk, who basically weren't working in any branches of government, and nobody ever foresaw them as working in a branch of the government. Now all of a sudden they're part of Trump's cabinet, but not necessarily Catholics, but they're both converts, if you can see what I'm saying. Elon Musk used to be an atheist. He used to be a left-wing guy. So did Trump. Now, keep this in mind. Trump was a Democrat. He used to send money to support the Clinton Foundation. So, and all of a sudden he just decides to run as a Republican, and he gets the backing of all of the right-wing party, and all the left-wing party instantly hates him when the left-wing party used to support him. And this is how it all works out. And it's not the first actor that we've had in as a president either. I know Ronald Reagan, and there's probably one or two others that I'm ignorant of, but generally speaking, the Jesuit order will raise up. If you go to a Jesuit school, that's the biggest part of the whole school is the theater, right? So they teach you acting, they teach you all this stuff. A lot of famous actors have gone to acting school, and they were ran by the Jesuits. So it's no little secret that these people are good at acting, I guess is what I'm trying to drive at here. And so you got actors, in all these different parts playing their different parts, and like we've talked about before, I don't know if they're implicit in the plan or if they're just kind of, useful idiots that are going along for the ride. But, it doesn't really matter. The end result is really what we're looking at. And, and so these parties are uniting to, or these different factions in this particular party are uniting to come up with the certain outcome. And that certain outcome is almost definitely, it is definitely the Sunday law. And it's definitely, this is the devil's thing. And more than, okay, so, we don't care what the devil's planning, right? Because he can plan one thing and it could all just fall apart. And that's why I think the whole, the 9/11 with the planes, I think the, 4 years ago, when we all thought President Trump was going to be president and he wasn't, and then you had all those people at the White House that stormed the White House, I think the devil was planning for civil war and it didn't happen. I mean, he plans a lot of things that doesn't actually take place. But what's really important is how God's planned this out, or, has prophesied it anyways. And if we read in Revelations, we know for a fact, how the outcome of this is. And there will be a Sunday law, and especially if we read this in Revelation 13, we read about two beasts actually, and it's the lamb-like beast really that the one that we're going to be interested in, because I believe that one is specifically speaking about America. And it says here, let me see here, and okay, well, so in verse 8 of Revelation 13, and it says, and it's talking about the first beast, okay? And we'll get to the second beast here real shortly. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life for the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Okay, so it's a worship issue. And and it says here in verse 10 that he... okay, that's not the one I was looking for. Okay, so verse 11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, okay? And so this lamb-like beast with two horns, these two powers, and it's been speculated on what those two powers are. I think they're a composite of many different opposing factions. You have the left and you have the right. You have the Christian, the Judaic, on and on. People have postulated for centuries about that one. And he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in sight of men. We talked about that a little bit. When fire came down from heaven, it was always a symbol of the infilling of the Holy Spirit. It was God's acceptance. And so this is going to be a deception where it looks like God's approval is on this, whatever's happening, right? Okay, i.e. the Sunday law. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles. So it'll be miracles. which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying unto them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image, this is important language, don't miss this, to the beast, which had been wounded by the sword and yet did live. And that's speaking of the deadly wound that the previous beast had received, but then was healed, right? 1798, papacy, the Pope was taken captive by General Berthier and put into prison where he died, given the beast its wound. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Now, we know this nation was patterned after Rome. If you look at the White House, it has all of the phylacteries or whatever of, you see the pillars, you see all of the architecture of it. It looks very much like a Roman building. The obelisk, the way that Washington, D.C. is laid out, you guys can Google that, just the streets of Washington, D.C., how they make the pentagram, well, it's called the pentagram, the pentagram, boy, my words. I got two words mixed up. I can't say either one now. All right, so that no man might buy or sell, save that he have that mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. There's three separate things there, okay? So the mark of the beast and the number of the name are two separate things, and a lot of people confuse that. They'll think the mark of the beast is a 666 tattoo. That would be the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 603 or 666 now. And there's been endless discussion on the 666 issue, right? But 666 is no big issue. I've spoke about it before. 666 was a very common thing that was known by ancient man, by man during Roman times, let's say, and even the Greeks too, because 666 was a special number that if your name added up to the 666, then you were considered to be a god. And all of the leaders were making their names to add up to 666, right? And that would make them into a god. That was like the perfect number, right? They dig up all these clay amulets. Sorry, guys. They dig up all these little clay amulets in the Roman ruins and Greek ruins, and by the hundreds, literally. And they have a bunch of numbers on them, and no matter which way you add them up, they always come out to 666. People used to wear these around their neck as like good luck charms, right? And so when the papacy took control, when they took power, it was natural for them to just automatically come up with names that added up to 666. It was their own imagination that did this. And it's interesting because you look at Vicarious Filii Dei, and you Adventists out there know what I'm talking about, but that's the official title of the papacy. Or every pope that's been in succession, has had this 666 or this Vicarious Filii Dei title that literally adds up to 666 in Roman, Greek, or Latin. Hang on. It adds up to 666 in Latin, Hebrew, and one other language I can't think of right now. But three separate languages. And so this was like and he was the leader of the church. So now he's God, and that's exactly what the title says. He's the vicar of God. And so, when you read about the names of blasphemy, that is exactly what the Bible is talking about, that this power would have the names of blasphemy. It would consider itself God, it would consider itself able to forgive sin, and even having the power to change times and laws, as we read there in chapter 7 of Daniel. And so it's all the same thing, right? And this power, having enough arrogance to think that it could change times and laws, or laws containing time, or the 10 Commandment law containing time. The fourth commandment is the only one that talks about time, and that's the 7-day cycle, right? And that transfer of that solemnity, and you can look it up, it's in history, from Saturday to Sunday was a Roman thing, and it happened in about, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but about, 321 AD? Was around the date, it was when Constantine became a Christian, and he passed some of the first Sabbath laws. And And so they were forced back then to keep Sunday at penalty of death. And so why would it be so mysterious to Christians nowadays that the same edict could be pushed forward again? Because we're told by Solomon that nothing's new under the sun. I mean, everything that is going to happen has already happened. You know, the devil's playbook has always been the same. He's not making up a whole lot of new things. He wants the worship. He wants the veneration that God is receiving. He wants the adoration. He wants all eyes on him. And if he could take our eyes off of Christ, off of Jesus, by switching the days, and a lot of people don't think that that's significant, and I don't know why they wouldn't think that's significant, because if you look at the 10 Commandments, there's 6 of them that literally address mankind, right? Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, honor your mother and your father, right? Do not covet. Those are all relatable to our fellow man, right? Sins against our fellow man. If we break one of those commandments with our fellow man, we've sinned against our brother, all right? If we break one of the first 4 commandments, we have sinned against God. And that's an entirely different matter, okay? Because there's two tables of stone, right? There was 2 tables. One addressed God, one addressed man. It's very simple. And these laws were probably written in blue topaz, I think somebody told me at one time. So these laws were blue, these blue laws, right? So what do they call blue law in the state? The blue laws are none other than laws regarding Sabbath days and the veneration of them, namely Sunday, okay? And because there's no law against doing anything on Sabbath. And if there were, that'd be just as wrong as a law that forced you to do something or not to do something on Sunday. It would be the same either way, however you cut it. This was a Jones and Wagner thing, Adventist history. You know, they've already tried in government to do this in America, okay? They've already pushed towards this thing, and it was thwarted. And so to my evangelical friends out there that think this is a small thing, listen, it's already happened in the past. They've tried to push this. You know, well, early America actually did have early Sunday laws. They had early Sabbath laws that the Puritans and the Quakers kept and were enforcing by penalty to those who would not do them, okay? So this is not nothing new. It's not. So look, what I'm saying here is that this is going to happen. Not what I'm saying, okay? Not what I'm saying. What the Bible is saying here is that these things are going to happen again. The stage is set. We're being theoretical as to how it's going to happen, whether it's going to be the right-wing party or the left-wing party, but it's definitely going to happen. And for us to think of, I mean, to me, it is so ridiculously simple. It is so obvious on the language of the Bible, and especially if you use the chiastic structure. And we talked about that a little bit last week. And if you think it's strange, the chiastic structure is strange in the Bible, imagine how we speak now, because it's not that far off from a chiasm, really. Now, let me give you an example. I came up with this the other day. Let's see if I can repeat it in my mind like I thought it. All right, so if I'm telling a story to you, let's say, okay, so me and so-and-so went to the store. Okay, I'm telling you this, that me and my wife, we went to the store, right? That's part of the story. And then I'm going to say, and on the way to the store, we met this guy, interestingly enough. Okay, I went back from the beginning, and then I started to talk about, you know, I gave more detail, didn't I? But first of all, you know, before we even left, I wanted to talk about, you know, we took the little gray Honda instead of the blue truck. And so we were driving down in the little gray Honda instead of the usual blue truck that we drive to the store before we met this man. And you see how the chiasm can work. We speak the same way. We write the same way. It's not that much different from ancient man, you know, from these ancient texts. And so it's not really that difficult of a concept to grasp a hold of. And here's the important part about that whole thing is that it fits. Everything fits. When you start reading the Bible like that, especially prophecy, I'm not talking about the whole Bible, because the whole Bible isn't written in a chiastic structure. But a lot of prophecy is. It'll give you some detail, then it goes back over it again, then it goes back over it again, and it goes back over it again. All right, very important. So we've already covered that last week, so we won't talk too much more about that. But, yeah, I don't know. It's been about 4 hours since I ate, and I haven't had heartburn lately, but all of a sudden I got heartburn. Maybe I drank too much water. Get old, and just weird things happen, man. Your whole system doesn't work like it once used to, and it's a little bit frustrating. I'm not a young man anymore. Used to have a cast iron stomach, could eat whatever I want in any proportion, and never bothered me one bit. Eat any time of the day, but that's just not how it works when you get, especially into your 50s. Stomach will start bothering you a little bit. But at any rate, so we have all of this groundwork that the Bible has given us to be able to give us direction in which ways we should go. A wise man is prudent, right? He watches where he's going, and so he doesn't fall into a trap. He isn't overtaken by the enemy. He's not subjected to trickery because he's watching. The Bible says that the good man suffered his house not to be broken in, or the good watchman suffered not his house to be broken into, right? Because he was watching. He was aware of what's going on, and that's the takeaway. And so that's what the Bible does. It gives us information so that we can be aware of what's coming around the corner, what's coming around the bend. And so we don't have to be surprised by these things, but the wicked will be surprised because they have been deceived by the deceiver into believing that this is all going to play out in a certain way. And it doesn't matter how you're deceived. You can be deceived in 27 different ways. You can be deceived thinking there is no God. You can be thinking that, oh, there is a God, but you can do whatever you want. And I've never read the Bible, but I believe in him. Who are you believing in if you've never read the Bible? You have no idea, right? Or I've read the Bible, but the devil has given me these clever deceptions to lead me astray, like the rapture, like the 1,000 years of peace here on this earth, like a lot of different things that the Bible does not teach, that people are, like life after death. The Bible doesn't teach that. It teaches that when we die, we die. We're dead. We don't know nothing until the resurrection, of course. And so from the time that we die until the time of the resurrection, there is no recollection of time. And so it's like an instant. It's like a snap of a finger. Death is merciful. God has made it merciful. Death is sad because when we watch other people die, and I just watched my dad die, my wife watched her dad die, and we're both watching our mothers grow old, and it's very sad. And we've watched many other people die over the years. The older you get, the more people you see pass away, and death is sad. But for the person who actually dies, it's a merciful thing because snap of a finger, and either it's judgment or it's they're resurrected into eternity, and at the resurrection day, both the wicked and the righteous will be resurrected at different times, of course. But now let's talk about diet for a little bit. All right, let's switch gears here, because diet plays a very important part in the Christian walk. Now, I don't know where Adventists have started to fall off the wagon here and have gone astray, but there is a message in the Bible that talks about the very thing that we're going to be talking about for at least the next few minutes here, and that is, and that's the importance of keeping diet, and especially in these last days. And I'll bring this up because I believe that God has given us a message in the Bible that has directed us to eat a certain way and to abstain from certain things. Now, God has always given us a diet, right? In the beginning, he said that every fruit, every tree, the fruit of every tree is good to eat except for the one of the knowledge of good and evil, right? That was a direction given to mankind. And then after the fall of mankind, he says every green herb is good, right? And then after the flood, he says you can eat the clean animals, right? And so God is always directing for diet. And people in Christianity nowadays, oh, diet's not important. Well, look, it is important, and I'll tell you why. Because it was important in the beginning when Adam was told not to eat of the tree of the fruit of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and he did it anyways, and the entire mankind fell. That's why you and I are in the position that we're in. It's because of our father, Adam, who ate the fruit. God said, don't eat it, and he ate it, and that's why we're in the trouble we're in. Over food, right? Oh, food's not important? Really? This just stymies me. This blows my mind. Oh, I can buy everything you Adventists talk about except for your diet. That's not found in the Bible. Okay, well, it actually is, though. And you can find it in the book of Daniel, chapter 1 and 2. You can find it in where Elijah was at the book of Samuel, or Kings there, where Elijah, before he was translated, ate only bread. Okay, the children of Israel only ate bread before they went into the Promised Land. Okay, the Promised Land is symbolic for heaven. It's symbolic for going in. Remember, Moses was punished, right, for striking the rock twice. He was told he could not enter the Promised Land on earth. But this is the mercy of God. You know, he took him up on a mountain, and where Moses died, God himself came and buried Moses, and then was to later resurrect him. And as far as Moses knew, he just walked to the top of the mountain, and he closed his eyes, and the next thing he know, he's being welcomed into the Promised Land. Okay, so a very merciful act, but it had, and God was able to send a message to the people at the same time, that even Moses wasn't beyond the instruction of God. And but this diet of manna in the wilderness for 40 years is overlooked by so many Christians before they went into the Promised Land. Elijah only ate bread. The worthies only would eat pulse, right? Or grains, and that's what that means. And in a lot of Jewish culture nowadays, many of them, hey, Watchman, how you doing, man? A lot of cultures, or a lot of the Jewish cultures, and I've met a few Jewish people here in America. I've never been outside of America, so I can't speak of outside of America. But I've met a Jewish lady who was predominantly vegetarian, and she just carried that through tradition. She didn't have any reason or rhyme as to why, but I think I do know why, because I think God's people had always sort of done this thing, but we've lost it. We've lost it, when through the Dark Ages, through the when Rome took the Bibles from the people, and they've lost all the knowledge that they've gathered. Now, I know what I know about the Bible because I was helped along in the learning of the Bible, right? Nobody ever comes to a fullness of the understanding by themselves. We're all to study and to study it out and to prove it ourselves, privately with God, but we learn things from other people, right? And then, if you hear someone say something, or you describe it, or they look up a verse, and all of a sudden you wham, something hits you, you can thank that person for that. And so all of us have gone on the backs of others, but imagine what it was like for the reformers. I'm kind of regressing here on my subject a little bit to make a point. But imagine what it was like for the reformers, because the reformers started flat-footed, They just opened the Bible. They didn't have anybody to teach them because they had lost it over that, 1,260-year period. And there wasn't anybody to really teach them or to tell them. They would learn these truths, shoot, I'm trying to think of a name. I can't think of the name. The most famous reformer of them all, Luther. Luther learned, when he looked in the Bible, he learned of the grace of God, which he had not previously known. But he started from that, right? And then he would later translate the Bible into German, and he would learn some more things. But he didn't know about the Sabbath. He didn't know about, a lot of these other truths that we take for granted nowadays, because our fathers, have all passed those things on. And Christianity has lost the diet that was to be given to the last people at the end of time. And it is an arguable thing. I know it's not something that can be let me say definitive. Well, it can be definitively proved, but not simply definitively proved. You know what I'm saying? It's not a simple topic. It's a topic that takes time to teach to people. And once you get the preponderance of the evidence, then you'll see that God does have a special diet for those who enter into the promised land in the last days. And why is that? Okay, so now we have science. Science is caught up with what is going on now. And we know that a diet free from animal flesh does a couple of things. And they've made this study many times by parties outside of the Adventist church. Vegetarian has been a thing for hundreds of years now in the United States. And they've done studies in prison colonies. They've done studies in schools. They've done studies in large groups of people and all around the world. They've studied the longest living people, and they always come up with the same answers. People who eat a flesh-free diet, an animal protein-free diet, are always have less disease, less diabetes. They're less, and here's the important part of the diet. Here's what I think is the important part. And one more thing before I get to the important part. They usually live longer, or they always live longer, about between 12 to 14 years longer. And that was a government study done 2 different times on the Adventist people in particular, because they noticed that we have less disease. But I think the most important thing, all other things set aside, I think what's actually important here is that, and the studies prove it, the science proves it, is people who abstain from the flesh of animals are less aggressive. They're more pensive. They're more thoughtful. They're more compassionate. They display traits of more compassion. Now, Watchman says, but it does say in Timothy that they will try to abstain you from eating certain foods God has created. Give me that text. I've read it before, but I don't know exactly where it's at. So, yes, thank you. First, you must have already been looking for it. So let me look that up real quick, and we'll read it. And of course, Watchman, I'm sure you're familiar with the vision of Peter as well, right? Okay, so 1 Timothy 4, verse 3. Okay, so forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats which God of them which believe and know the truth. Now, and it goes on to say in verse 4, let's not forget that one. For every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving. For it is sanctified by the word of God and by prayer. Now, a couple things in there. First of all, in verse 4, it says that for every creature of God is good. Now, that would violate what was spoken of in Deuteronomy about the clean and the unclean, okay? That would include, if you read it by face value, but of course the Bible is always in context. And that would include pork and any other unclean foods as well, except for verse 5 here says, for it is sanctified by the word of God and by prayer. So if it's sanctified by the word of God, what do you mean by on the carpet? Let me see. Oh, yeah, Peter, with the sheet, right? That was taken up into heaven. That's another one people use to justify the eating of unclean foods. And I think you probably already know the answer to that one. If you don't, let me know. We'll talk about that one too. But it's sanctified by the word of God and prayer. Now, is the eating of unclean food sanctified by the word of God? No, obviously not. Now, the context of this is multiple things. There was a group of people in the day, and namely the pagans, who would do 2 things, and that identified them as to their purpose. And that was they would abstain from meats on certain days, mainly Friday, and they would also abstain from marrying. Now, there's a religious group today that does exactly that, and so that's what it's addressing in particular here. It's not actually talking about the eating of unclean foods or anything like that of that nature. It says, seems Jesus made corrections about the Old Testament in different places, like eye for an eye and to turn the other cheek. No, I don't believe he did. I believe he clarified the law because what people were doing at the time was they were actually like, so for example, what was taking place is the neighbor would cause harm in some form or fashion, and they would take the eye for an eye quote, and then they would cause the very same. They thought that was a license to cause harm against them, or in fact, the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was actually a law given to the civil authorities that was to be enacted through civil justice and not through revenge, okay? And they were using it as revenge instead of civil justice. So a little clarification there. It says, Jesus also said, it's not what a man puts in his mouth that defiles him, but what comes out. Oh, you know all the verses. Well, yes, but again, context. So what was the context? The context was a washing of the hands, right? They said that they were ceremonially unclean. And so Jesus addressed that. Now remember, Jesus was the same one that gave Moses the law on Sinai, and he also gave all of the civil laws and the health laws, because they're all separate. The civil, the health, and the Ten Commandments were all, and the ceremonial laws were all separate. And you can read that throughout the Bible where it talks about the laws and the testimonies. And so we got Matthew 15:11 here. And I think that is what you're referring to when you talk about the unclean. Because if this was what Jesus was talking about, then Peter would have had no problem eating whatever he wanted on the sheet, right? The vision that was given him afterwards. But it said there that he afterwards pondered what the meaning of the vision was, and then he later would say that he would understand that God had told him not to call anything common or unclean. And so the sheet was let down 3 times. He met 3 people, 3 Gentiles, which were considered unclean. So, you know, again, Matthew 15:11. Yeah, so not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. Now, remember, he said that they were condemned for not washing their hands, right? And so that was the context under which that was. In other words, Jesus was saying, hey, if a little dirt gets into the food, that's not going to hurt us. He wasn't talking about the content of the food. Moses, the law of Deuteronomy, also goes against the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. You'll have to explain that one because I'm not aware of that one. Also goes against the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. Oh, right. When he, so there's some confusion there, obviously, with people because they said, well, God says that you shall not kill, but God has commanded the Israelites to take the lives of their combatants in war, or to punish a man by death. See, the actual commandment reads, thou shalt not do no murder, okay? Now, obviously, murder and civil punishment are 2 different things. If a man murders and kills another man, then his life must be required of him also. He has taken another man's life, another innocent man's life. And so his life is required also. So civil law demanded the life of that individual. That's not murder. That's justice. And so in the end, there's going to be justice metered out as well. And that justice will require the life of everyone who has not chosen God's grace to get him off the hook, if you will. The ceremonial and criminal law was abolished. It's just the 10 Commandments. The ceremonial law, yes, and the criminal law was it's kind of partially followed even today. I mean, there's things that talks about how railing must be put around a porch, because if you don't put railing around your porch and a man falls off the porch, then you're liable for the man who falls off of your porch. I mean, that was the civil law back then that's still partially being used today. If a man takes a life, his life is required. Death sentence is still practiced in many countries and in some states. The health laws definitely are partially followed here. To bury your excrement, to quarantine is also another law that God has given us. To separate the sick, to washing of the hands, all those things. Those were all health laws that went along with the food laws. So they're all still partially followed to this day. The ceremonial law, no, because the ceremonial law was a fulfillment of shadows and types, and we read that in Galatians and different parts and other parts. So hang on, let me catch up with you here. Watchman, you're machine gunning me. Okay, so only the Jewish people really seek out kosher foods. Christians do not keep it as important. Yes, that's correct, and that's what I was talking about. The laws of Deuteronomy about stoning people. Yeah, and again, that wasn't murder. That was a civil, and the judges would have the last say. You can't just go out and just stone anybody you want, because that would be murder. And you couldn't just come up with, oh, this man has sinned, so therefore he must be stoned. No, that man had to be taken to the judges. And that was a system of a theocracy where God, the priest would wear the ephod, had the ermine and the thurman, and they would ask questions, and they were yes and no questions. And so God himself was actually judging these people and condemning them to death if it was... Okay, King James Version says kill. The NIV says murder. So one up for the NIV. We can throw that at Ricky next time we talk to him, huh? And so really what you want to do is you want to look into the Strongs. And so the definition is definitely murder. And that's what it's talking about. It's not just talking about killing, because then that would be so vague as to what that means. I mean, does that prevent us from killing animals too? And so, I mean, does that prevent us from self-defense in the case of someone trying to hurt you or your family? Because you can't kill the man, and many have interpreted it as such, and I think that's a misinterpretation of the Bible. Okay, so there are common sense laws, it seems, in it about things, especially when speaking about incest or sexuality. Absolutely, bestiality and all those other things. We still follow those things, right? Those were all good laws. And under the theocracy, certain things can only happen under the theocracy, because if you do these things outside of the theocracy, then it's man's judgment and not God's judgment. And so once the theocracy was basically replaced by kingship, some of these practices were still carried through, but then tyranny can step in and take over, especially, in certain judgments and things. But yeah, the system of the judges and the prophets and the way God had set it up was as near perfect as a system as could be on an imperfect world. And of course, there might have still been mistakes, and there might have still been some bad actors that still played in their roles and everything else. But basically, it was about as good as you can get. And so like I mentioned before, a lot of those things are still carried over into our modern day laws. And why the Christians don't keep the health laws, or only part of them, right? We only keep part of the health laws. We don't keep them all. We say, well, all that stuff was done away with. So now we don't have to bury our excrement. We can have sex with animals, and we can, do all these other things. So they're very selective. They just want part of the Bible. They don't want to give up their bacon. And adultery with a death sentence, that's not anymore. Well, in some countries it is. And it used to actually hold a pretty stiff sentence here in America not that long ago. Adultery was punishable by jail, which adultery seems to just be overlooked very casually now, with no punishment whatsoever, which I think is part of the problem of what's going on with the breakup of the families. It seems to be so easy to just go out there and to just commit adultery, and not have any repercussions for it. And you're actually hurting other people when you do these things. And anybody who's been, through a nasty divorce or have had a spouse that have cheated on them, they know that the pain that this inflicts upon the family and upon everybody around them, and in their influence as well. Okay, so Watchman says, the New Testament sets more of a moral way of life to follow in sins listed that you should not do. Galatians 19:21. Let's look that one up. Let's see where. So Galatians 19:21. Wait a minute. Did you say Galatians 19:21? Hang on. Back up, Watchman. Galatians. Sorry, my eyesight. Galatians 5:19 through 21. Sorry. All right, here we go. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, and lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, and heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have told you in times past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. Okay, so there you have it. That's laid out pretty nicely. And then 1 Corinthians, flee from sexual immorality. All other man's sins are outside of the body, but he who sins sexually sins against his own body. Yeah. And you know, and we see this happening in the world. I mean, people are contracting diseases and it's very debilitating. So, in Galatians chapter 5 all the way through, basically, we've read a couple of those verses there, but yeah, and actually, if we go to Galatians chapter 5 here, down there at the bottom in verse 25, it says, "And if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit." And so, and it gives us the fruit of the Spirit and the fruit of the flesh. You know, living the contrast between living in the flesh and living in the Spirit. And people said, well, you know, if I'm living in the Spirit, that's a mental ascendancy to God, then I can do whatever I want in my flesh. And of course, you know, a lot of us know that that's not right either. If you read earlier on it, it tells you the fruits of the Spirit. Yeah, that's right, it does. And Galatians 5 is a really good one for that. Man, I wish you'd have jumped in earlier on the live. We could have discussed this in more detail. But we are running out of time here. And but no, and just to end here, I do believe that the diet is important, and a lot of the verses that we've been all deceived and given to us, you know, to deceive us into thinking something else is really just another one of the devil's ploys. And I know, Watchman, that you're a student of the Bible and you'll check out all the things in those, but you know, the important thing is that you know, we have to have that humble spirit to be able to be teachable and I'm including myself in that as well. So, and I have examined the subject many times over, and I always come up with the same conclusion. And if there's anything new anybody wants to show me regarding diet, you know, I would certainly be open for it as well. And so we would appreciate comments in the section below from whoever's watched this and kind of followed along with what we're talking about today. But my conclusion on the diet was this: that there is a diet for God's people in these last days, and mainly for the reasons that it clarifies our mind. It helps us spiritually to be able to get through these last day deceptions. You know, if we're less aggressive, if we're less angry, if we're calmer, if we're more spiritually connected, I mean, whatever it takes to be able to gain that little bit of advantage, right? God knew years ago that, you know, of course, he did give us flesh to eat after the flood because there were no plants at the time. That's the only way man could live. And of course, even in countries nowadays, you know, where there's no vegetation and there's no water to grow vegetation, but you have goats, you know, of course, eat the goat. You know, it's always preferable to eat the flesh of animals rather than die, right? So this is something that, you know, has to be in context as well. Jamie Walden and Benjamin Franklin. So I bet you that link shows how Benjamin Franklin was a vegetarian, right? Am I right? I'm not sure though. But okay, Carrie, see what you think of the viewpoint in the video I posted. If you get it in time, well, you'll have to send it to me. Actually, Watchman, on email it to me if you can, because after this, I don't have time right now to look for it, or look at it. By the time I kick this live off, I won't be able to find it. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and God bless each and every one of you. And if you guys, we're still handing out Great Controversies. If you guys would like a copy of those, you guys can email us at prophecymontana@gmail.com, and just give us your address. And we've been mailing out a few of those lately, and we'll be willing to give you guys a copy if you guys would like one. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you. We'll see you this Sabbath.